You're listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Welcome back to The South Stands, everyone from San Francisco. I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Sunday, November 1st, and I am very happy to be joined by fellow South Stands contributor Chad Plummer in Northeast Ohio. Chad, how are you today, my friend?
I'm doing well, Z. Thank you. How
Excellent.
are you?
Excellent. Great. Good to be with you, my friend. Excellent. We are also joined by our man on the ground in Denver, Mr. Paige Van Horn, PVH. What's the good word?
Oh, just working a little hangover, but we're all good, buddy.
You and me both, my friend. You and me both. In fact, I got a little hair of the dog right here in my right hand. So, of course, we are here.
Wow, that's early.
It is early. Yeah, 10 a.m., mimosa action there, 10 a.m., that's allowed, right, on a Sunday?
Oh, yeah. Sparkling rosé, of course.
All right. Well, we are here to recap Ohio State's 38-25 win over Penn State in Happy Valley last night. But fellas, before we get into that, I want to remind our listeners about our new website, which you can visit at southstandsosu.com. You can listen to all of our podcast episodes there and check out our new blog. I also want to invite our listeners to head over to Apple Podcasts and rate and review the podcast. We'd greatly appreciate your feedback there. Also, we invite you to give us a follow on Twitter at South_stands. That's South_stands. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. Finally, if you have any questions or feedback for us, you can send us an email at thesouthstandsosu@gmail.com. Okay, so last night, Justin Fields, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson were all explosive for the second week in a row, though this time against a pretty good Penn State defense. Justin Fields was a surgeon in the passing game, finishing 28 of 34 for 318 yards and 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Receiver Chris Olave finished with 7 receptions for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. Garrett Wilson caught 11 balls from the slot for 111 yards. He also opened the game with a 62-yard run on a jet sweep. That's a wrinkle I don't think any of us have seen before. Certainly not with Wilson. The Buckeyes also got a solid performance from Master Teague in the run game. That was really good to see. Teague finished the night with 110 yards on 23 carries and a touchdown. Trey Sermon chipped in 56 yards on 13 carries. Tight end Jeremy Ruckert had a nice game with 2 TD catches. Now on defense, the story of the game was the Ohio State front seven led by nose tackle Tommy Togiai, who led the Buckeyes with 7 tackles and 3 sacks. Guys, when was the last time a nose tackle had 3 sacks for Ohio State? I cannot think of a player in my days as an Ohio State fan at that position turning 3 sacks. That's crazy. Tackle Haskell Garrett was also very disruptive on the interior for Ohio State. His story is amazing. He continues to have a very impactful season at that position despite coming off a gunshot wound this offseason. I also like what I saw to Jonathan Cooper and Zach Harrison. They both flashed tonight from defensive end. And I got to give credit where credit is due, boys. The Ohio State linebackers, Tuff Borland and Chad, your boy, Pete Warner, both really good last night. They were a big reason Penn State quarterback Sean Clifford was not able to get much of anything in the run game. We knew Penn State was going to rely on Clifford in the run game. Penn State finished the night with 44 yards on 27 attempts. Now, things got a little sloppy in the fourth quarter as Sean Clifford was able to connect with Jahan Dotson for a couple of touchdowns. Now, Dotson had a really nice night against Shaun Wade, so give him some credit, boys. He finished with 144 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns, but really Dotson was the lone bright spot for Penn State. And in the end, I think his contributions were a little too late, I think. The Buckeyes outgained Penn State 526 to 325, dominated time of possession 37-23. Now, Penn State was gifted 6 points by the officials. There was that weird phantom roughing the passer penalty on Baron Browning that extended Penn State's first scoring drive. There was also a very strange situation at the end of the half where Ohio State thought it had successfully run out the clock on 4th down, only to have the officials give the ball to Penn State at the Ohio State 36-yard line with 1 second left to get a cheapy field goal on the board for Penn State before the half. The Buckeyes missed 2 chip shot field goals and helped the final score look a little bit more respectable. But last night, I think, was clearly a situation where the final score was not really an indication of how badly Ohio State really dominated that game. The Buckeyes moved to 2-0 and will face Rutgers next Saturday in prime time, by the way, in the shoe. Okay, fellas. Now I want to start with what we saw from Justin Fields and the Ohio State passing game, because I think you'll agree with me. We're seeing something pretty special there. Chad, I want to start with you. Tell me what you saw from the Ohio State passing game last night.
Well, I got to tell you, that Field man, I mean, we all knew he was a special player last year.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you what, in the off season, he has stepped up his game. I mean, that kid can throw the football.
Yes, he can.
I mean, even under pressure, he puts it on the money.
Yeah.
How many times last night did a receiver actually have to stop for the ball?
Good point.
Not one.
Not once.
I mean, the receivers are running right under him. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And the one where he got away and almost fell down. You talk about having some strength in your legs, and then throws that pass as he's falling down, which was a beautiful pass. I mean, it's so like it warms my heart to watch that kid throw a ball, man. He's special.
Yeah, he's special. PVH, what did you see from the Ohio State passing game last night?
Well, I wonder when do they just abandon the run game? Because when you're that good and that efficient, it's something I think you kind of, we could laugh and chuckle about it, but I have a buddy here in Colorado who was saying that last night. I mean, the run game was definitely better.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, T flashed some, a little bit, I guess a tougher running style. Sermon actually had a pretty decent game. And I think the offensive line played lights out. And that's the other thing. Fields has all day.
Yeah.
I mean, a couple times he got hit. But, it's one thing to have the skill set that he has, clearly, but it's another thing when you just, you can sit back there, go through your read 3, 4, 5 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And his accuracy is pretty amazing. I don't think any of us saw that coming. So yeah. And I was thinking about it watching the game. It's like, is this the most prolific passing attack in the history of Ohio State with Wilson and Olave and Fields? I mean, it's got to be debate. I mean, I think you could make a pretty strong argument that it is.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I want to put this question to both of you. Chad, how would you compare this passing game to what we just saw just 2 years ago with Dwayne Haskins and that record-setting passing game? How would you compare the two?
That's a good question. I mean, Dwayne Haskins was a very, I won't use the word prolific, but he was a very good passer. I mean, he had a lot of time, like Paige said. But I just feel like Fields is he's gone to another place, another level. He shifted into another gear, and it just, and you know what, a lot of it, Paige made a very good point about the O-line. He does have a lot of time.
Yeah. But
we do, with that receiving core we have, they're special as well. I mean, they're running just great routes. Oh. And it's just, as much as I loved Haskins and that passing game, it'd be hard pressed for me to say that I wouldn't favor the Fields, Olave, Wilson, and sprinkle in some other guys like Jameson. They got him in the game last night. What did he catch? Like 2 or 3 passes?
Couple balls, yeah.
They're trying to incorporate him. Yeah.
PVH, how would you compare what we're seeing now to what we saw just a couple of years ago with Dwayne Haskins in the Ohio State passing game?
Well, in fairness to Haskins, our receivers were good. They're just not as good as these guys. These guys are better. So that definitely is a huge advantage for Fields. I mean, it's kind of funny too, because like they're so confident in the run game, like those, I think it was 4th down when he threw the touchdown to Ruckert in the end zone. I mean, it's just like, they're not afraid. Like they almost 100% believe that they can get whatever they want with the passing game, which is really pretty astonishing. And so, the amount of weapons that are at his disposal is just absurd. And so I think, as great as Haskins was, is more of a pro style quarterback. Just the escapability that Fields has and the ability to run when he takes off, I think you're going with Fields here.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you were to go into a lab and build the perfect college passing game, we might be looking at it, because you have a player in Justin Fields who is in total command of the offense and in total command of his own game. The one thing I love about Fields is a kid who has a baseball background, is he has the ability to throw the ball from different arm angles and put different English on the ball, depending on what he thinks he needs. If he needs to get it over a linebacker or a safety. He had a completion, I want to say it was in the second half. I don't remember the exact play, but it went for about a 25-yard pass. I believe it was to Olave. It might have been to Wilson. But I remember when he released the ball, I was like, oh, his arm got hit. Because the ball kind of floated, and it was this little floater, and it landed perfectly in stride. And I believe it was Wilson who brought it in for like a 25. And I remember thinking, oh, his arm must have gotten hit. That's going to land incomplete. Instead, it went right to Wilson. But I think that's Fields just manipulating the English on the ball. You know, we've seen him on some of those short crossing routes where he goes about 3/4 on the release. And Chad, to your point, you mentioned it earlier, he's hitting these guys in stride where they can catch the ball in full speed, you know, full stride and make things happen after the catch. So you've got a quarterback in Fields who's next level, second year in that offense, total command of the offense. And you can see Ryan Day now opening up the playbook. We're seeing things we've never seen before. You have an offensive line that is giving him all day to throw. And then you have playmakers on the outside in Olave and Wilson, who I think we have not seen receivers of this caliber, especially paired together, in quite a while. And not only from physically what they can do, but also I think there's an intellect there, an intelligence in the way both of these receivers play. They run precise routes. They're very smart players. And then finally, you've got a play caller in Ryan Day coupled with Kevin Wilson, what they're doing, play calling. Doesn't it seem like there's just an ease with the passing game? I mean, you've already got a guy in Fields who can make all the throws, but it seems like a lot of his throws are super easy. The guys are wide open. Garrett Wilson is running wide open from the slot. You need a 3rd and 6. There's Wilson wide open for a 15, 20-yard completion. So you factor in all of those things. It is as if Ryan Day went into a lab and came out with the perfect passing game. Now, we'll see how things go as the schedule evolves, but I think Penn State was probably the best defense they're going to see during the regular season. I can't imagine they're going to see any team better than that. But that was my big takeaway with this offense. Chad, I agree with you. I think we're seeing a next level evolution in this passing game from what we saw 2 years ago. It is really something to behold.
How about that pass to Olave? Like, I think it was our first, one of the first or second touchdowns where Fields threw it up and he Olave put his hands down over the guy's helmet and caught the ball.
Unbelievable.
I mean, that pass was, just unbelievable. And when you said that about Fields with the English and different throwing angles, and by no means am I trying to make any comparisons, but you see Patrick Mahomes do those kinds of things when he's throwing the ball.
Oh yeah. Oh,
and it kind of just reminds me a little bit of what he's able to make those adjustments with his arm. And
I like that comparison because no doubt Fields is watching Mahomes and maybe borrowing from his game. I really, when I've seen him, especially in those crossing routes, when he goes 3/4 kind of almost sidearm, I'm like, he borrowed that from Patrick Mahomes, repertoire, right? Wouldn't you think? Paige, any other observations on the passing game you'd like to share before we move on?
I think it's just easy. Those Penn State defensive backs, although Porter, that guy's a
he's a beast.
Gamer.
Yeah.
He can play.
Yeah.
But still, those guys are they're playing 10 yards off them. So, just, up and outs, and, he didn't even really unleash crossing patterns yesterday. It's anything that they want to do, they can do. It's honestly, it's just too easy right now. And that was against the best team they're going to frickin' play all year.
Yeah.
I mean, what's going to happen when they play Rutgers and Maryland? I mean, when honestly, the talent level on the other side of the ball, Penn State is just clearly the best team they're going to face all year. Mm-hmm. I mean, God, it's scary to think what they'll come up with or what they'll do to these opposing defenses.
I mean, going into the game, I thought Penn State was kind of uniquely equipped to deal with this Ohio State passing game. I thought they were very good at defensive end, and neither of those defensive ends for Penn State had any impact on the game. And I think they are genuinely good players, and those are NFL defensive ends. Those kids are playing on Sundays. And at corner as well, Paige, you mentioned him, Joey Porter Jr., they've got some guys that can play, and they were helpless to stop that Ohio State passing attack. I mean, and I think, was there any more evidence of kind of the desperation from James Franklin when he goes for it on 4th and short on his side of the field on the first possession of the game?
Right. We can't stop these guys. We've got to just try to score every time we can.
Yeah. So I think we're seeing something very, very special in the Ohio State passing game, perhaps something we've never seen before. Olave and Wilson, I don't know that we've had two receivers as good as those two on the roster at the same time. Now, we had Michael Thomas and the burner. Help me out, guys, in 2014. Devin Smith. Thank you. That's who I was thinking of, Chad. Yeah, Devin Smith. Yeah, right. And Michael Thomas. I was
going to say Santonio Holmes.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay, so there you go. No, actually, Paige.
Yeah.
Paige, you make a good point. I think not since Santonio Holmes and Ted Ginn Jr. and Gonzalez have we been this good and this diverse at receiver. I mean, I think you have to go back to those guys. They're very special at those positions. So the sky is the limit for the Ohio State passing game. What did you guys think of what we saw in the run game? Paige, I want to start with you. What did you think of what we got out of the Ohio State running backs, Sermon and Teague, yesterday?
Yeah, better, definitely better. But again, I think a lot of that comes down to the offensive line. There were holes there. Teague ran. He had some good runs. It's a step back from Dobbins. It just is. I don't think that's going to change. I think that's pretty much, a foregone conclusion at this point. That's the bad news. The good news is it's not going to matter, right? They just need to even have the threat of the run game.
Yeah.
And that's all they need. And, if they can get 150 yards rushing, then I have a hard time seeing anybody beating this team. And so that was the other thing. And the other pieces, did Fields run the ball? Was there a single called run for him all night? I don't recall one.
I don't recall one either. Fields finished the game. Actually, I'm looking at the rushing totals here. Fields only 6 carries.
Fields had -4.
Yeah. 6 carries for -4, but I think that includes the 2 sacks because with quarterbacks they include the sack yardage. Yeah, only 6 carries, and I think most of those were just him running from the pocket. After not being able to find anybody downfield. They were not designed runs. I don't remember a single designed run for Fields in the game. Chad, do you?
No, I really don't. And that's like the first time in like how long that's actually we've had a game where that hasn't been drawn up for him to run.
Yeah. No, it's been a while.
Yeah.
What did you think of Teague and Sermon yesterday, Chad? Any thoughts on the two of those guys?
Well, I was surprised because like we had 45 rushes yesterday compared to 34 passing.
Yeah.
Which was kind of crazy. But Teague had some very explosive, and you made a good point in our text thread yesterday, Z, about how Teague is a much better inside runner.
Yeah.
And, he had some great runs last night. Now, and I think you might have said this a couple weeks ago on the pod, how they're both coming off the injuries and not. But I did see a flash or two last night of, I think, how Sermon's going to be as the deeper we go into the season and the Big Ten championship and the college playoffs. I mean, I think there's some. I think he's going to be a baller by the time we get to that situation when we need him, because he had a run last night that he got just a seam to the outside, and he's got wheels, man.
Yeah.
But Teague is obviously, give it to him right up the gut.
Yeah.
He just puts his helmet down and runs people over.
Yeah.
I mean, but Sermon's more of a fast, finesse runner. I mean, I saw him take off a couple tackles last night, but yeah, I mean, like Paige said, it's great that, it is not a J.K. Dobbins. We will be having that coming in next year with Trayvon Henderson and Evan Pryor. I think we'll probably never see a running back duo like that. Not to get ahead of, I get excited about the recruits coming in, but, I think it's just everybody's like, wow, they have such a special passing game, but we can't sleep on their running game either, because I mean, it's just, when you take that, offensive line and the running backs and Sermon
Teague,
Teague. You know, you can't sleep on that offense, man. It's like it's special.
Really potent. Yeah, I think Master Teague distinguished himself last night as the lead back, and I have a feeling going forward, we're going to see more of a 60-40, 65-35 split between Teague and Sermon. I thought Teague was more efficient in the red zone. He was more effective in the red zone. Sermon likes to bounce things outside. You know, he played in the Big 12, so he's a little bit more of a finesse runner. Chad, as I think you pointed out already. I think Teague's going to be the guy at tailback. Paige, I agree with you. I think he's going to give him a solid – he presents a solid threat in the run game for Ohio State. But I think last night what we saw against a pretty good Penn State defense on the road, Teague distinguishing himself. So I think Teague's the man at tailback. That was my big takeaway from the running game. And it was also good to see Justin Fields, 6 carries. 15 was way too many last week.
I was just going to say, you know what? You talk about the transfer portal. I mean, look at with the guys you have coming in next year, you've got like Marcus Crowley, who's still kind of injured. You got Steele Chambers. Mm-hmm. You've got all these guys. Those guys, what's going to happen? Teague's going to be coming back.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, there very well could be somebody, at least one player in the transfer portal. I think that's probably a pretty good bet. Paige, before we move on, any other thoughts on the run game?
No, the other thing, it's not specific to the run game, but I felt like they scored those first 2 touchdowns so quickly that they actually had a massive letdown pretty much for the rest of the game. I mean, even still, they, went ahead and put up another 28 points or whatever. But from that moment forward, I mean, I think even as a fan watching the game, I was like, this is over. I mean, I was wrong. And by the way, like, we were wrong. We thought this would be a close game. Like, this is not going to be even remotely that competitive. Well, that's true.
I'm kidding.
I'll be going to the post office this week to just shut your mouth.
Well, there was one play in the run game, which, Paige, I have to point out because I know it made you giddy when you saw it. It was a 3rd and 3 conversion at the Penn State 5-yard line. Justin Fields lines up. It looks as if he starts in the shotgun. He creeps up under center. It looks like he looks to the sidelines as if he's going to call an audible, and then just runs up the center's butt for a 4-yard gain on 3rd and 3. That sets Ohio State up to eventually get into the end zone. I know that made you very happy.
It warms the heart.
It warms the heart.
That was very cool.
Yeah. No,
cool.
Surprisingly, there was a few more opportunities for them to do it later in the game, and they didn't do it, where I thought for sure they would. I mean, and I think when we talked at halftime, I was like, look, you could theoretically just run quarterback sneaks every play. They get 4 yards. You would march down the field and score a touchdown. Like, it's an unstoppable play.
Yeah. The offensive line was a force yesterday, and they gave Fields all the time that he needed. Only sacked twice against a pretty formidable pass rush. As I mentioned before, I think Penn State they're very good at defensive end. They're very good at in the front 7. And I think that's the best defense Ohio State's going to see in the regular season. So kudos to the offensive line. Now, that's what I think we all expected to see from the offensive line when the season started. They were a little lackluster last week against Nebraska, maybe shaking off some rust from the long layoff. But man, last night was what we all expected. Nicholas Petit-Ferrer at right tackle. Looks like he's settled in very nicely over there.
Yeah, Myers is doing well.
Myers is doing very well. Yeah, Chad, what did you see from the offensive line last night that stood out?
I feel like they kind of got they're still a work in progress. A lot of them, they have not consistently played together as a unit. Mm-hmm. You've got some new pieces in there like Miller and a couple others, but I think they took a step forward from last week. I think they're starting to get a little bit more in sync. And I just, I think really by the end of the season, barring, God forbid, no injuries to our offensive line, mm-hmm. those boys are going to be a very well-oiled unit when it's going to really count.
I'm with you. Yeah, I think it as good as anybody on the offensive line, Ohio State, I think. Paige, before we move over to the defensive side of the ball, do you have any thoughts on the offensive line you want to share?
No, I think we covered it. They just played really well. dominated. I mean, they did, both lines dominated, but especially the offensive line. And, you know, the holes were there. And Fields had all day to pass. I mean, that was just like too unfair. It's too easy. You cannot make it that easy for Ohio State. And, you know, it all comes down to dominating the line of scrimmage, and they were absolutely dominant last night.
I think we would be doing an injustice if we didn't, like Paige was saying after that first score, if we didn't give some big old props to Wilson on that juke to the inside on that defensive back, because that guy was there, you know, I mean, to make the tackle on that play. And he like went to like faked like he was going to the outside, cut inside. That guy just, his feet were just, he couldn't even move.
You're talking about the jet sweep?
Like, oh, shit.
You're talking about the jet sweep?
The first play. Yeah, when he made that cut move inside, that was so nice. That guy was like, oh, shit.
That was a beautiful play. It's one we've never seen. We've not seen before. Wilson would not have been the guy I thought they would have run that play for. Paige, we were talking about triple distilled smooth Jameson being the guy that would run that type of play.
You know,
but again, you know, Day has completely opened up the playbook. He's got the offensive line to do it. He's got the trigger man and Justin Fields to do it. He's got the playmakers on the outside to do it. And I feel like we're seeing a completely new level to the playbook.
You couldn't put that any better. This is the best Ohio State offense that I can honestly say that I've seen in my lifetime.
I feel like I can confidently say that they can go blow for blow with Alabama and Clemson. And again, I think at the end of the day, that's how we are evaluating this team. Paige, what do you think from what you saw last night? If we're applying the Clemson, Alabama, you know, can Ohio State beat Clemson, Alabama in back-to-back playoff games? If we're applying that standard.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. I think you feel better about this team than we did after Nebraska. But then I also come back to, I still don't think this team can beat last year's team. So do I think they can hang? Yes, I do. I don't think it's a foregone. I mean, it will take their best game, I think, to beat those two teams. But they have it. They can do it. They definitely can make it happen. And then, you know, the other thing is, you know, to have a player like Fields at the most important position might be enough, right? I mean, obviously Lawrence is as good, clearly. And the guy at Alabama, he looks like he can play too.
Right.
But I'll take my chances with Justin Fields. I mean, we're basically there, right? I mean, can we just say it? I mean, the rest of the schedule, thank you very much, Michigan State. But like, we're now just getting ready for the playoffs. And who knows, you know, with Wisconsin, what's going to happen, you know, with that whole situation. But this whole thing is now just a warm-up act until, you know, the Big Ten championship. And if it's Wisconsin, that could be a tough game. But what does this team do when they're going up against Clemson and Alabama? Because the way the schedule is set up, I mean, pesky Indiana, like, what are we talking about there?
Yeah, it would appear to be smooth sailing for Ohio State. But of course, you got to be careful when you assume that. There's always a bump, a weird game on the schedule that you don't anticipate. And we may or may not see that this year. But overall, yes, I tend to agree with you that they cleared probably their biggest hurdle. They did it pretty easily and didn't even play a perfect game in doing it. Well, so the other half of that question, is Ohio State good enough defensively to compete with an Alabama or a Clemson, to get enough stops against those high-powered offenses? And did Ohio State answer some questions on the defensive side of the ball in that respect? I think we've got something special on the interior of the defensive line with Tommy Togiai and Haskell Garrett. Chad, I want to kick this over to you. Talk about what you saw defensively, especially on the defensive line last night, that stood out to you.
Well, you know, Togiai is like, he's a beast, man. He's he's great to watch. You know, who stood out with a couple me too last night. Tyler Friday had a couple nice defensive plays that stood out to me, which, you know, I really wouldn't think, you know, that's really not somebody's name that we just throw out there in talking about the defense. But I know he had a couple great plays as well last night. You know, I'll be honest with you, like, I wasn't like, Vincent? Like, I don't recall him being,
he played a little bit
effective last time.
Yeah, that was his first action in over a year, and I think he was just getting his feet wet.
Right.
Yeah, Togiai and Haskell Garrett are holding it down in the middle for now. And they look to me as good as anybody on the interior of a defensive line. I mean, Togiai has 3 sacks from the nose tackle position. That's absurd. Haskell Garrett was not credited with a tackle for loss, but he was very disruptive back there. A little bit of a different approach defensively for Ohio State. The pressure is coming from the middle. And honestly, if you can get consistent pressure from the interior up the middle, I think that's even more disruptive than pressure off the ends. Paige, what did you see from the defensive line last night?
Is it me, or is it only because Cooper wears the 0 and it's so distinctive that it like jumps out at you when you're on the TV? But he had a hell of a game.
Yeah,
like,
he was good.
Very disruptive.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of making a joke there because that 0, it's like, man, it's amazing what a difference
I like
it makes, because I'm still trying to figure out who some of these guys are.
Right.
The defense played great, and we'll probably get there. You talked about the line, but the linebackers played well. Our boy Tuck Borland had a good game.
Yeah, he was good.
It was all around great effort. I mean, ironically, the guy that you could say had the roughest game would be the guy you think is our best player, who's Sean Wade.
He did have a rough night.
Some of that guy was just making some ridiculous catches. It's like, if you're going to make that catch, it wasn't like Wade was getting burnt. Like, he was on the guy. The guy was just, ridiculous one-handed grab. So
I think he had Gorilla Glue on that glove.
Dotson had some stickum on it.
I mean, come on,
some
man.
Lester Hayes stickum on his gloves. Yeah, he was good. Dotson was good. I want to talk about Wade and what we saw from the Ohio State secondary, especially late in the game, because it did get a little sloppy. But I agree with the two of you. I think the front 7 brought it up a couple notches. They were a little shaky, and you give them the benefit of the doubt. A lot of rust to knock off from the long layoff against Nebraska. Hey, give Nebraska a little bit of credit. They did some creative things in the run game. They've got 2 pretty slippery quarterbacks in the run game that are tough to bring down. So to me, what I saw is a front 7 that took it personally. They took it to heart, that opening day performance, and they wanted to improve on that. And I think all of them, the front 7 was much better against a running quarterback in Clifford. Let's face it, Penn State was going to want to run the ball with Clifford. He was their best running threat. They're down their top 2 running backs. Paige, I said to you in the prediction pod that I felt this game was really tailor-made for the Ohio State linebackers, that they would have another opportunity to silence some of their critics, but that, Penn State certainly for most of the game was not really going to challenge Ohio State down the field, and they really did until the fourth quarter when they actually had to throw the ball because they were coming back from a large deficit. But I give the front 7 a lot of credit. I think they have something there on the interior. I don't think that's a fluke. I think Togiai and Haskell Garrett are legitimately good, impactful players on the interior. And then, hey, give Teron Vincent a few weeks to round into form, get his legs under him.
Yep.
He could be a third guy that could be a major factor for Ohio State on the interior.
Yeah.
I love what I saw out of Cooper. I thought Zach Harrison had a nice game. It was good to see him start. I think Harrison was in the doghouse last week. None of the beat writers said anything about it. I think they were probably told to keep it under wraps, but Harrison was clearly being disciplined. I mean, he was working with the 3s in the warm-ups. He only played 15 snaps last week. He had that big tackle. It was a little reminiscent of the Penn State game, in 2017, where he tackled both Clifford and the running back simultaneously, right? So that was
amazing.
That was a nice tackle. So I liked what I saw from the front 7, and give Borland a lot of credit, give Pete Warner a lot of credit on Penn State's first possession where they went for it on 4th down on their side of the field. Warner did a hell of a job flushing Clifford out of the pocket and chasing him down, forcing him to throw the ball away, giving the Buckeyes the ball back, and really Ohio State seized control of the game at that stage. So give Warner a ton of credit. He was very good for them. Right. I'm not sure we can count on what we saw at a tough Borland last night each and every week. I think this was a game that was really tailor-made for his skill set, but I give him credit for stepping up. I've been very hard on Borland, as you both know. And same with Jonathan Cooper, who I think is a really good, solid rotational defensive end who can flash at times. I'm not sure I would expect both of those players to be, as impactful as they were last night for the next, 6 or 7 games, but they were really good last night. Give them credit. Chad, go ahead. You had some observations.
I want to give some big props up to our defensive coaching staff because, when the game started out, they were confusing our defense, and, those receivers were running those slot like routes, across the middle, and they were getting confused. Mm-hmm. And then you could see the adjustments made. And like, there was a play that like distinctly sticks out in my mind where Werner was stuck in that. And then he was like, no, they're running that same thing, what we adjusted for. So then he got back up to the receiver.
Oh yeah,
so
that's right.
You saw that. I wanted to give the props to the defensive coaching staff, and I got to give some, like, props to my boy Barrett Browning. Did you see that coverage he made in the end zone when he got
nice
back there and deflected that pass
on Freiermuth?
Nice.
Yeah. No, really nice. Yeah, I thought they did a good job on Freiermuth, by the way, and they had several guys covering him. You also saw Josh Proctor drawing coverage on Freiermuth on a couple of downs. They're doing some interesting things with Proctor, by the way. Did you guys notice that? He's only playing third downs. Mm-hmm. They're using him in kind of that bullet roll near the line of scrimmage. I kind of like that role for Proctor. So PVH, any other observations on the front seven before we take a look at what happened in the secondary last night?
I did notice what you just talked about with Proctor too. He kind of reminds me of is like a lanky, rangy, what was his name? Spellman, who was the defensive lineman.
Alonzo Spellman, yeah.
Alonzo Spellman, right?
Right.
Just those huge arms, man. And I don't know. I just think they need to find ways to have him in the game.
I agree.
He still might be a little raw, and he might frustrate you here and there, but he has those football instincts. Mm-hmm. And when he was like creeping up into the box, almost like in the linebacker position. Yeah. And we had sort of talked about that. I think they might have found something there with that, and I think if any help that they can get in that area is. They definitely, that's a good thing.
I agree with you. I think he's probably a little too boomer bust for the coaching staff to trust him at that deep safety spot, right? You have to be a steady hand back there. You can't take a lot of risks, but it seems like he's got a nice niche there on third downs, playing kind of that star position, that hybrid strong side linebacker safety role near the line of scrimmage. I thought he was good last night in that role. All right. Well, PVH, you mentioned it. Shaun Wade struggled a little bit in the fourth quarter of that game. He was pretty good for the first three quarters. Jahan Dotson victimized him in the second half, in the fourth quarter for 2 touchdowns. What was your takeaway from what you saw there? Is that something that you worry about going forward, or it was just kind of a situational thing and you just give credit to Penn State for making plays? What did you think?
Yeah, you just, sometimes guys make plays. Sometimes guys make amazing plays. It's the old John Cooper. Their players are on scholarship too. Right. The guy just was, he was good, and he wasn't, Wade was in position. It's almost like the flip when Olave made that first touchdown catch
over Porter Jr.
The end zone. Yeah, he was all over him. The guy just made a better play. It happens. It's football. I'm not worried about Shaun Wade at all. I mean, it's I think you just tip your cap to Dotson. He just was. He was awesome.
Yeah, so. I tend to agree with you there. I think Penn State, that's not the way Penn State wants to play, right? With Sean Clifford slinging it all over the yard, right? They were trailing. They knew they were trying to get back into the game, and they went into, I think they took risks offensively that they wouldn't normally take. Clifford threw virtually on every down. Now, of course, ultimately that caught up to him, right? Because Clifford threw a terrible interception to Hooker that really kind of, ended any hope Penn State could have of getting back into that game. But yeah, I think Penn State you see that, right? I don't know if they were going no huddle, but it definitely opened things up, and they weren't really worried about turning the ball over. Really nothing to lose there. And you give credit where credit is due. Dotson made some great catches and pretty good coverage against Wade. I'm not going to worry too much about that. I can't imagine any of Ohio State's future opponents, certainly before the playoff, targeting Shaun Wade in coverage, right? I think you proceed at your own risk if that's your approach. Chad, what did you think?
I agree with you guys as far as Wade. I'm not worried about Wade whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there was a couple plays I did see that I feel his coverage was not Shaun Wade-like, if you will.
Right.
But like Paige said, there a couple circus catches that were made. But that pass was, any other plays Wade would have been. Knocked it down and whatnot. And, Sevin Banks, I feel like he had a good game last night too.
All right. So none of us seems to be overly worried about what happened late in that game. And look, as you say, Paige, they're on scholarship too. That's a pretty good Penn State team. So a pretty big hurdle in this shortened schedule for Ohio State to clear. And now we're looking at Rutgers next week in prime time. Who knew? Rutgers in prime time in the shoe. Paige, do you have any other thoughts about what we saw last night in Happy Valley?
I would just say, it kind of goes back to the other question you asked, if they match up against Clemson. Clearly, they're going to be targeting Sevyn Banks. They're going to be going after that guy. Right. Trevor Lawrence is going to be going after that guy. Mm-hmm. And Cam Brown got hurt, so I don't know what. Oh, yeah. So that, to me, is where the vulnerability is going to be for this team. And if something derails them from, getting into the playoff, well, not even that. They're going to make the playoffs. I'm very confident about that. But to beat those two teams, that's the weakness. And that's what those, good teams do. They identify it and then they pick at it.
Yeah.
And so, I think they're still, and hopefully they get better, and they will. But I think Banks and, that other side of the secondary is still going to be something that Ohio State's going to have to worry about.
Yeah, they're untested, and I don't know that they're going to see a passing game between now and the playoffs that are really going to test them.
Yeah, to your point, Paige, I feel like Kerry Combs is going to be watching film. Like, if there's anybody that I have confidence in taking those guys and letting them review their mistakes over and over and drilling it in their head and having them ready. Like when we're talking about, you referenced Trevor Lawrence. I think, Kerry Combs is the man that I feel very confident that he'll have them ready when we get to that point.
Yeah. If
he's got $1.5 million, I hope so.
Well, there's good reason to trust his track record. There's good reason to trust Combs' track record at developing corners. So let's hope as the season goes along, we'll see development there. Paige, you made a really good point, and I forgot to mention that. Cam Brown going down with a non-contact injury. I don't know about you guys, but as somebody who's blown out an Achilles before, to me that looked like he might have blown out an Achilles.
Yeah, it just had that look of, oh man, because it was. Yeah, I mean, he just kind of went down. And you're like, oh man, that could definitely be his Achilles.
And he had to be carted off, as I understand it. I don't think we saw it on the telecast, but I saw a tweet or heard from one of the other beat writers that they actually did have to cart him off the field. So that's not a great sign. So this would then appear to open the door for Tyreek Johnson. And Johnson is a player. Yeah, I mean, a guy I've been, very hopeful we start to hear from. Now, Tyreek Johnson, this is a guy who was I believe, a top 25 recruit in the 2018 class. I believe he's Shaun Wade's cousin. They played at the same high school, built very similarly. Does this open the door for Tyreek Johnson as that nickel cornerback?
He was a 5-star recruit, number 2, safety in the country coming out of Florida. Mm-hmm. And I that kid's going to be a baller. He's 6'1", 192 pounds. So, I mean, I would love to see him in the game incorporated as well. But, I think we're going to be fine there. Like I said, if, with Holmes at the helm there, I feel confident that we'll be back. And it sucks that Brown did that. That did look like a season ending kind of thing. So
yeah.
Let's hope for the best.
We'll hope for the best there. Yeah. Well, Paige, as you like to say, woe is us. We're going to have to rely on a former 5-star cornerback to fill in for Brown. Like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Very nice win for Ohio State. They're 2-0. This is exactly where you want to be. We're still seeing an evolution in this passing game that's very exciting. I feel like it hasn't hit its ceiling yet. And I think we're seeing some exciting things on defense, especially on the interior of that defensive line. So a really positive step forward for Ohio State as we move into week 3 against Rutgers. Okay, I wanted to take a quick look at the Michigan State game from yesterday. What another disappointing performance by Jim Harbaugh and Michigan in a rivalry game, in a game that matters. 27-24 was the final. Really, Michigan State to me seemed to be in control from the start. Now, they never really held a huge lead in that game, although they led by 10 late and kind of salted away the clock. But boy, Michigan State to me yesterday looked a little bit like one of those Mark D'Antonio teams circa 2012, 2015, where they just didn't give an inch in the run game, got competent quarterback play, just tough as nails, really frustrated and flummoxed Joe Milton and that Michigan offense. Paige, I want to start with you. What did you see in Ann Arbor yesterday from Sparty against Jim Harbaugh's team?
Well, I didn't see much of it. I only saw the first quarter, but you knew it was going to be a good game after the first quarter. I just figured Michigan would eke it out. They didn't do it. Obviously, Minnesota stinks, so the luster is off of that win. And Michigan is back to who they are. You know, it's 6 days. You know, they were back to just being the great powerhouse and, you know, of yesteryear. And we're right back to who Michigan really is, who Jim Harbaugh truly is. It's a freaking joke. I mean, you know, as an Ohio State fan, I want them to be good. Does it warm my heart when they lose? Yes. It is the proverbial win-win, but I think it's really good for them to be good. And Jesus Christ, hold up your end of the bargain, Michigan. It's pathetic. And I don't know where they go from here. You and I talked about it. You know, they lost a lot of guys, and I was surprised, you know, when everyone was, you know, back on the Michigan bandwagon after one victory that, you know, this is the team, this is the year. And 6 days later, they lay this egg. It is, it's almost too good to be true, but, you know, I don't know.
It's outrageous.
Chad, before I kick it over to you, I want to tell you what's coming down the pike for Michigan. Next week, they're at Indiana. Indiana's proven to be a pretty good team with Michael Penix Jr. I don't think I like Michigan in that game. The week after that, Wisconsin. Now we know Wisconsin's dealing with some COVID issues. If Wisconsin is whole for that game, you could be looking at a 3-game losing streak for Michigan there. They're at Rutgers and then home against Penn State. They get Maryland and then the season finale in Columbus against Ohio State. Boys, I'm looking at 4 more losses for Michigan. At IU, Wisconsin, Penn State, and at Ohio State, right? Would you agree with that? What do you think, Chad?
I'd be hard pressed not to agree.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be very hard pressed not to agree. And you know what? If you're a Michigan fan, man, I mean, see, I'm like, you know, there's guys like Gallagher and some other guys who just, you know, love Michigan to lose. Well, you know what? I view it in a different light, like, you know, because it is our conference. It's the Big Ten. You know what I mean?
Right.
And Michigan is supposed to be a powerhouse football school. And, you know, I want them to win every time because, like, you know, quite frankly, I want them to be undefeated when we play them and kick their ass. But, you know, that's just, that's not how the days we're living with Michigan anymore. And I mean, if you're a Michigan fan, you just got to be, you know, on suicide hotline like every other day. Like, it's just crazy. But I think what you also got to give Mel Tucker at Michigan State some good props.
Oh yeah.
You think about, they get embarrassed by Rutgers, who is obviously just like, you know, I mean, you brought Shiano in there, great, but still, if you go off the track record of the last couple of years, and you open up and you get embarrassed by Rutgers. So, I mean, you know, Mel Tucker obviously got that shit together, like kind of like D'Antoni. He's like, this is our rival game, man. So he got those guys, you know, pumped up and ready to play. And Harbaugh, it's just like I feel like they don't even have a game plan. You know, they're just out there hoping, oh, you know, hope we win this one. It's like, you know, I mean, it's so outrageous. And what really blows my mind, guys, is yesterday there was like more than one of those clowns on ESPN Game Day who said that they had Michigan at their number 16 in the country.
That's crazy.
And I was like, what?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's you know, I like them to do well, you know, like Paige said, but it's now become laughable. It's embarrassing. It's like, I feel like, you know, it's sad is what it is.
Yeah.
It's a circus up there, man.
Yeah. Paige, they're not holding up their end of the bargain. I think you put it really well when you said that. They're not holding up their end of the bargain. They're paying Harbaugh, what is it, $7-8 million a year? Is that right, Chad?
Yeah, I think it's at $8 million.
Yeah. So I think it's pretty clear that Michigan as a program has decided, like, look, we're not going to wade into the same waters as Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, Georgia. I think as a program, they seem happy with not playing at that level or competing at that level. But even still, you have to expect more than this, more than what we saw yesterday. I will give credit, though, as you said, Michigan State, man, they were balling out, and Rocky Lombardi, their quarterback, I told Paige, I told you yesterday, like, it's not like Michigan State junked it up and, made this game, like a fist fight in a phone booth. Rocky Lombardi was going down the field against those Michigan corners, completing long passes. Those receivers were coming down with the ball in traffic, making one-handed catches. Michigan State was really balling out. I mean, I was really impressed with Lombardi. I remember seeing him 2 years ago in East Lansing when we played him there, and he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn with a football. The strides Lombardi has made as a quarterback, I was very impressed with what Michigan State did. And their defense looked very much like the defenses we remember from those great D'Antonio teams that just wouldn't give you an inch, completely stonewalled the Michigan running game. I still don't know how good they actually are. I guess I can say that about most Big Ten teams at this stage. I'm not sure how good anybody actually is. But that was a very surprising result. That game was played in the Big House in Ann Arbor. Another egg laid by Jim Harbaugh. And it makes you wonder, how much longer is Michigan going to settle for this? Because I think all three of us agree they could be doing a lot better. Paige, would you agree with that?
I don't know. I don't know that you can say that, because I've mentioned it before. Is Michigan closer to like Nebraska than they are Ohio State? I mean, what if you move on from Harbaugh? Where do you go? Mm-hmm. Right? You don't have the in-state football like you do in Ohio or Pennsylvania, for that matter, or Texas and Florida for the recruiting.
That's true.
The brand is the brand. That's not going to, get any better or worse, I wouldn't think. But I just kind of, it goes back to what, we talked about when they play Ohio State. Is this a rivalry anymore? I mean, I don't know if they can actually expect to compete at the same level that they historically have done it. I mean, how much more evidence do you need before you just come to that conclusion?
Yeah.
And if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Michigan, I mean, how much more of this do we have to see?
Well, hey, if Rocky Lombardi is going to light you up for 323 yards in the air and 3 touchdowns, what's Justin Fields going to do to that defense?
Their secondary is a hot mess. Yeah. It's not even going to be. I mean, Wilson and Olave will probably shatter every record in the history of that rivalry in 4 weeks or 8 weeks when they play.
Yeah, there's a couple people like Bo Schumacher. He's rolling over in his grave.
Oh, I'm sure.
And Michael Jordan is wondering who in the hell from his brand decided to put
the Jumpman logo
in Michigan's uniform. He's like, Jesus, they're fired.
Well, I always thought it was weird to have a basketball icon stitched to your football uniform, especially when it's a guy who didn't play for you. It was weird. I don't know. Anyway, that's a... Yeah. Well, hey, listen, boys, we are well over an hour. I know you probably have other things to do with your Sunday. I want to thank you so much for making the time. And unless either of you have any other thoughts you want to share from the action we saw yesterday, I thought we would wrap things up. Chad, anything else you want to share before we go?
No, I just wanted to say it's great to be back home with you guys. And I will say, I think I did predict the score of 42-24 Buckeyes. What was it? 38-25?
Nicely done, my friend.
Yeah. We should have had what did we do have to bring up? What happened to our field goal kicker yesterday?
So
that's maybe that's okay.
Yeah, that's a good. He was complaining of some groin tightness or something in warmups. Javier was. So they were aware that he was a little dinged up. And of course he missed that chip shot field goal and they decided to give him the rest of the night off. But Javier's a good kicker. That's something to watch.
That's why I was very surprised.
Yeah, that's something to watch.
That makes me feel better, that I didn't know that. I hadn't heard that. So that makes me feel better.
So he was a little nicked up. Cool. PVH, before we sign off, anything else you want to share from yesterday?
Did Rutgers win yesterday?
No, they lost. They lost to Indiana by 16, I think. Indiana handled them in Piscataway.
Oh, they did.
Yeah. Yeah, but they were much more competitive.
Right? Yeah, I was just... Yeah.
Did you guys happen to catch any of that Maryland game Friday night?
I was not able to see it. I knew that it was very crazy. A lot of back and forth, and Maryland blew it hugely.
Yeah, it was actually pretty exciting to watch. I mean, for not having any volume on and just like looking up at the camera while I was waiting for the band to come on. But it was so exciting. But the Big Ten, yeah, like we said earlier, it's crazy.
Well, hey, against Maryland, Talia Tagovailoa can play. They've got a guy who can play at quarterback. Now, I don't think they can. They can do anything to stop Ohio State, but they could make it interesting, especially if Ohio State's kind of not on their game. That maybe they're not quite as focused. It was a weird game 2 years ago when we played them. There was a game we should have actually lost. Yeah. But that could make it interesting. Hey, who knows? Maybe Michigan State can do a little something. They've been a thorn on our side historically. That game is in East Lansing a little later in the season, right before the Michigan game. So again, I don't know who's good yet. I don't know who we can really put our faith in outside of Ohio State. It feels like there's a lot of unanswered questions, and from week to week in this weird truncated season, you just don't know what to expect, especially with COVID. All right, fellas. Hey, listen, Thanks so much for making the time. I'm going to let you go. We will reconvene middle of the next week and have a peek at the Rutgers matchup. You've been listening to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and visit our website at southstandsosu.com.